Okay, Eddie, why don't you introduce Holly?
So Holly, we met through our academy. She was part of one of our OGs in the 1.0 Academy. She's the founder and CEO of Gray Matter Marketing, a legendary category design firm in the life sciences business. So very badly needed as a category that I know a little bit about, where technology and product and reign supreme, and no one really thinks about the category itself and what it's doing. So it's a very noble category, as obviously people's lives are at stake and their health, but badly in need of what Holley and team do. So that's awesome. Before that, Holley has had a long career in marketing, really done some amazing things. I'm going to botch just some massive wins and outcomes of creating new categories, from intuitive surgical to aesthetics at Allergan. And so, Allergan is the OG of aesthetics and still is the 800-pound gorilla in the space, and well trained, well suited. And there's probably a story that Holley will tell us of the road less traveled, because could have probably was on track to be a big time muckety muck at any of these places, and yet chose a different path. And that's kind of what we would love to dive into a little bit of, like, at what point in time did gray matter marketing kind of incept into your mind, and what was going through your brain when you decided to leave to launch it?
Well, thank you for that very generous introduction. Gray Matter is about 18 years old now. I have to think way back to when that was, but the truth of the matter, it feels like it was yesterday in some ways. And I'll just say I was a very type A person. I'm still a very type A person. Order matters to me. I need to know what's happening. My kids say that I'm very particular. They're like, you're very particular. And I'm like, I just need to kind of have control of my life and know what's happening. And I don't do well when there are things out of my control or things that don't go as planned. Early in my professional career, I traveled over, 100,000 miles a year, traveled a million miles in 10 years. And like, if my plane was delayed, I would just flip out. And finally I was like, I cannot control this. You just need to get over this, Holley. And so I just am sharing this with you guys so you understand. I wasn't like a flighty person, like whatever happens, happens. That was not my personality
This is
at
back
all.
in the day when, if you were a muckety muck with certain airlines, they might hold the plane for you for an extra
It
five
happened a
minutes
few
to make
times.
it.
They also took people off planes for me. And I was always
Yes.
so embarrassed. I was like, I'm so sorry, but I have to get on this plane and I need a seat. I just share that so anyone can understand. Like, it wasn't like I just was a free spirit, always doing crazy things or whatever. I was living in Santa Barbara at the time. And as you mentioned, I'd had some success, and I had been at Allergan at the time. Had just been acquired by Allergan. But I had been kind of in the same position for about 4 years. And I felt at that time, one challenge in my mind was, well, I've kind of done this. Like, I don't want to just keep doing this same thing again and again. I wanted, a different kind of category design problem to solve. I just felt like we were kind of squeaking out some incremental changes versus really transformative outcomes. They didn't have any kind of other products in the pipeline that I thought were that interesting. As I
Is this in
mentioned,
the 2000s? Like, what circle, what
yeah, this
time
is
frame
around
is this?
2000, and this would have been 2005, 2006. Yeah, 2006. So this company was acquired by Allergan. The division I was in, as you mentioned, was very lucrative. We were like the darling. Someone said, the first integration meeting I went to, someone said, it's like buying a new car, taking off the lot, opening the trunk and finding gold. That's kind of what they said. And so I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. This is a way to really, as you were saying, kind of find my next promotion, get a bigger seat at the table, and really kind of have a new challenge from a professional perspective that I thought would be very interesting to me.
And what was the goal? Kind of like C-suites? What was?
Yeah, my whole, from a kid, I was like the class president, student government president, sorority president. Like, that's just been my MO. Like, that's
We'll
the
just call
track
you the
that I've been on.
president, Madam
Yeah, just
President.
call me Madam President from now on, please. Yes.
Yes,
Um,
Madam President.
yeah, so it was always this idea of like, you just got to keep going to get to the top. That's kind of how my mind was wired, I guess. And so I went to I think it was like the second integration meeting with all the kind of the executives, leaders. I was, I think, one of two women in the room, and one of the executives walked in and said, "Hun, would you go get me a cup of coffee?" And I just kind of thought, like, this asshole thinks that I'm like an assistant, an executive assistant, and I couldn't possibly be there because I was, presenting to all these people. And I just thought, like, this is an old boys club. I just can already see the pathway to growth is going to be very difficult, very limited. And I also could see that their values just weren't the same as mine. I could just tell they were, kind of disrespectful. They were kind of exploitative. I just could tell, like, this is not the people I want to be killing myself for. And I kind of felt like I'd been like kind of killing myself, working so hard, getting on planes all the time. And for what? That time I started thinking, do I want to stay here for another 5 years? Where will I really be in 5 years? Because of my success, I was getting calls from people saying, like, do you know anyone that's like you? We're thinking about investing in this company, would like your opinion. And finally I thought, well, maybe what about me? Like, instead of someone like me, what about me? And so I would definitely say I had not, woken up one day, 5 years earlier with a business plan to start my own consulting firm. I just really was like, I can't do this. I know I don't want to do this, or what are my options? Kind of the funny story that I don't think I've told publicly before is that I was approached by a company, in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was living in California, and they said, like, we want you to, join our company as a chief marketing officer to help us essentially take what I'd done at Allergan, but create a national chain of ambulatory outpatient surgery centers to basically do weight loss and anesthetic procedures. I'm a dummy because I had never done this before, but I essentially said, okay, I'm going to take that offer, but I need to tell my boss that I'm leaving the company. So I set a meeting and I told him I was leaving. And then I, sent an email back to the new company in North Carolina and said, I'm going to join y'all. And the CEO wrote back and said, well, I'm sorry, but I needed a response from you by 5 o'clock Eastern time. And the offer is no longer good. And I thought, like, okay, I don't have a job. I just quit a job that was, by all intent and purposes, like, very solid, successful, financial. And so, Christopher, you'll be proud of me. I went and I called the competitor and said, would you like for me to come and consult with you? And they said, that's fantastic. Like, when can you start? And so that was truly my first, like, gig.
That is, oh my goodness.
And so
God bless you, Holley. Isn't that a great thing to go do?
It felt really good because I thought, like, thank God that this happened, because that was clearly not the right company, for me. They didn't value me enough that they put literally a timestamp on this offer when I felt like I had such a unique skill set that they could not find someplace else, but they were willing to basically say, like, oh, we don't need you anymore. It's past 5 o'clock. And that was scary because I thought, God, I've just let go of this really stable job. And I'm basically taking, a chance. But I also very much felt in control of my destiny. Like, I'm in control of my life. I can create any life I want. And I'm going to just take this as a next step. I kind of felt like it was almost like a lily pad. Like, I don't have to stay on this lily pad forever. I'm not making any commitments. I'm just going to take this next step and consult. And I did that for about a year before I realized I'm going to go deep into, I'm going to form Gray Matter and kind of build the company that I wanted.
So wait, this is an amazing story. So I'm just trying to, let me take a wide angle lens here. You don't have to get into a lot of details around this, but like, when you made the decision to, originally to leave Allergan to go to this other thing, did you talk to other people about it, or was this kind of like, I'm just
I told my parents, I told all my friends. I mean, I managed a big team.
Yeah.
I lived in California. This is North Carolina. And I was like, I negotiated, like, I'm going to stay in California. I'm going to travel. And at some point they're like, you're going to have to move. But I was like, yeah. So, like, everyone knew, like, everyone knew.
Everyone knew. Okay. So everyone knew. And then and then you quit, you accept, you're told that's not valid anymore. What is the elapsed time before you send the middle finger to go to the competitor?
Like, a day or two. Like, it's so short. Cause I seriously was mortified. Like, here I am, I have no job. And I just thought,
was that a rational decision? It's a very smart one. Was it? It was purely like, what were the emotions you were feeling? Like, I'm just trying to get underneath that.
One, I think, was F you, just like, F you. I probably said it more colorfully. But then I thought like it was a little bit of, what do you call it? What do you call like when a woman who's been, what's the term I'm looking for? Like,
Woman scorn.
yeah,
Have
like
no
it was
fear
like a
of the woman
woman
scorn.
scorn. So I was just like, I'm gonna show you. It was very emotional, very emotional.
And then so you consulted with the competitor for a year, like, and then how does the story play out? I'm just kind of curious about.
So I think there was a couple things. One, as I said, like it wasn't my dream job per se. I just thought like I gotta have something. But I think it gave me time to realize that there were certain constraints that were required for my skills to actually to be recognized and to create the transformative outcomes. And so the idea was wanted, I'm a big football fan, an Alabama fan. So Nick Saban always says, it's not what you want. What are you prepared to get it, to do to get it? And so to me, it was like they wanted these things, but they weren't prepared to hire the right people, make the investments, these types of things. And they were just kind of unreasonable. And I just thought like, I am not, again, kind of going to invest my time
This
and
is the competitor now, or okay.
Yeah, they were the other company basically didn't really do anything. This is the competitor. But I think, they had been very successful in a different kind of adjacent capacity. I think they just thought they could do the same thing again. And I was like, that's not how it works. I could just see that there was, some dysfunction. They were kind of pressuring me to move to North Carolina. And I was like, I just don't want to do this. I was actually going through a divorce. And I was just like, it just everything felt kind of just not in a good, nothing felt right. Nothing felt right to me. And so I thought if I were to give myself the grace and create what would my ideal world look like professionally. I was approached by a very, very large and very successful life sciences company who wanted me to basically come and join them. And this would have been in Orange County. But I kept trying to negotiate. They wanted me to move to Orange County, and I was like, what if I'm there 4 days a week? This is well before there was any type of work from home type of thing or remote. And I just kept trying to like make it work. And finally the president looked at me and said, I just don't think you want this. And I was like, I don't. And so I think those two experiences kind of forced me to say, if you were to create the world that you want, what would that really look like?
That's amazing. And then, how did you do that? Did you
So,
a lot of internal? Did you
I
talk to
feel like there
friends?
was, yeah, I think there was some luck and there was some divine intervention because of the reputational capital I had created. I was getting a lot of calls from companies. They, needed help, investors, VCs that were trying to invest. It was a very hot space, the category that I had been in, which is metabolic surgery, kind of weight loss, diabetes. It was a super hot space. Everyone wanted to like get in on it. And so I felt like I just was getting all these calls. I didn't even have a website. I didn't have a website for like 5 years. So it was all just word of mouth. Who knew me? People respected the work and were kind of happy to recommend me to others. And so my first, kind of my first formal engagements at Gray Matter were two companies. They basically paid for half of my time, 2.5 days a week. And someone got 2.5 days a week. They were very different businesses. One was medical aesthetics. One was bariatric, endoscopic bariatric intervention. It was just, again, like I felt so lucky that I felt like these things fell in my lap, but I think in some ways they didn't just fall into my lap,
Well,
and I think that was
a
something I
decade
didn't
plus
recognize.
of building your reputation capital where your phone was ringing off the hook.
Yeah. Yeah.
Funny how after a decade of hard work, I just got lucky.
Yeah. Lucky me. And I snapped my fingers.
Well, so I'm trying to understand too. So you go from, I'm going to go run this thing in North Carolina, and then leads to a consulting thing for another company, a competitor. That company is not going to be the right kind of category designer as you were sniffing out at that point. And then, but there were others who aspired to the same. You had plenty of reputation capital so that people were like, I want the outcomes that Holley is famous for. So can I do it over and over again? And that a lot of executives that I've known, some of them my clients, when they move into consulting, whether accidentally or not, that they often will be like, well, what did I get paid last at my old gig? And I'm just going to do that going forward. Was that kind of what you were doing? What I love about your story is all throughout, the value of your value. So I know at some point you were like, I am undercharging and I need to raise pricing. And then there was another kind of decision point of like, I think I'm going to actually scale this beyond just a solo thing. Like, help us understand that journey.
So I think in some ways I felt like probably my entire professional career when I was working for others, I was always undervalued in my mind. And I don't think that that was just, me self-inflating, what I thought. I felt like I was really doing the work and making decisions and impacts that others were materially benefiting from, but I was really not getting paid for it, frankly. And yes, I had stock options in some of those companies, but just, I felt like my contribution, my work was not being recognized. And that was very frustrating to me. And so I think the hardest part for me was like, in my own mind, where should I have been kind of on a salary perspective? In leaving the corporate world and going out on my own, just as a solo entrepreneur, I didn't even know what to charge. I had no idea what to charge. And so the first company that I went to, they said, okay, here is probably your old salary. We'll gross it up by like 30%. I don't even know what it was. And it sounded reasonable, but like I didn't really know the difference. So I thought like, this was pretty good. And I certainly had worked with like lawyers and tax accountants. So I knew there was some hourly rate that people that were, experts charged, which was a premium. And I thought a little bit like, who am I to charge, this much money, And I also think I struggled with, people often think it's like just marketing. Like it's just, as Christopher said, it's just arts and crafts. Like, why would I spend money on that?
It's just parties and crayons and shit.
Yeah. And so to try to get them to rethink, like, no, this is actually not arts and crafts. This is your commercial growth pathway. And what is that worth to you? I think for a number of years, I struggled in the early days to figure out like, what should I be charging? What's appropriate to charge? And I tried also, because I was so type A, I wanted to know, how much am I going to get each month? I mean, I had a mortgage in Santa Barbara, which is not cheap. I needed to know that I had, guaranteed income at some level to make me sleep at night, not to be just so worried and stressed. And so I think in the first few years I'm sure, not charging enough, not getting paid enough. But I also realized that if one of those clients goes away, half of my income evaporates overnight. And that was really scary. And so I also realized that I only get paid if I'm working. It was just Holley. And by all intents and purposes, it was an hourly rate. It was like, okay, I'm going to give you 20 hours a week, 20 hours times whatever it was. That's how much I get. And so if I need to make more money, it means Holley has to work more hours. And I had, as I mentioned, come off like a really grueling kind of corporate, schedule. And I was just burnt out. I just I couldn't maintain that. I didn't want to maintain that. And so I thought, okay, this is a chance to create, at the time I was calling it like a boutique agency. I thought like we're very bespoke, like we're very specialized. And there was two people that I had worked with at Allergan that I had essentially hired and kind of trained and managed, that I said, like, would you guys be willing to come and work with me? And I think at the time people were still, kind of buying Holley, but I was desperately trying to say, like, it's not just Holley, it's gray matter. And this is our process, our lens, our offerings. So no matter who you're interacting with, you're still getting that experience. I don't have to be the one on the call doing the work, what have you. And that was a transition. It did take some time, I think, before people accepted that and recognized that it wasn't just a one woman show.
So what's fascinating about this is that, okay, so I'm just trying to put this in a timeline. So 2005, 2006, the journey begins, right? And then around how many more months or years until like, and I'm listening.
2007, 1 year basically is when I actually incorporated gray matter. So first it was Holley, Holley.
So
consulting, yeah, and then it was.
I'm listening to your words because you said something really important. You had said, yes, you had people, relationship capital that you could reach, that you had basically raised through the corporate world and the like, and obviously were a leader that they would follow. But then also you said something really important was, I don't know how intentional this was, if you can talk to this, you had codified a process. You had if I want to grow, without me going back to my corporate hours and days and the like and stuff, I need to hire people, but they need to know what to do. So did you intentionally create and write down your process, your intellectual capital? Like, here's the way that Holley has driven outcomes, and here's the way that you can now drive. Like, how did that work?
I think in some ways I did not have a blueprint. It was in my head for a while, but I think I had Frankenstein a process or a blueprint that I felt was going to work for Gray Matter's clients or Holley's clients, depending on the time. And I think that people were coming to me for different reasons. I hadn't productized my offering. And I think that was something it took me a little bit of time to recognize, is like, you can't just do whatever people ask. Like, you have to be in control and say, this is what I'm offering. It's more reproducible. And I could plan resources and, how are we going to do this? How long is it going to take? How many can we do at the same time? And so I think it took me a little bit of time to recognize, like, I need to productize my business. And I think that the other thing was what I realized.
Hold on, Holley, can I interrupt you there for a sec?
Yes.
I think this is one that a lot of people miss. And it's the concept of leverage. That is to say, there's only so much one person can do. And if you look at it incredibly, a friend of mine and I were talking the other day about Martha Stewart, and there's a documentary out on her, and I was asking her opinion of it and so forth. By the way, my opinion is she's legendary. She's one of my heroes. And while she did make a mistake on the selling of that stock, it was infinitesimal. And for the record, I believe that were she male, that would not have happened to her. That was bullshit, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. And so there's this element of her that is just like that, right? And they say, well, she doesn't do all those things. She doesn't plant all the flowers and make all the... Well, of course she doesn't. She's built a system. She has intellectual capital that she has figured out how to scale through others, through products, through books, through entertainment, through et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's this weird thing, and I have this with some people in my life. Their math in their head is, in order for me to be more successful or make more money, I need to work more. Those two things are like interconnected. It's like, okay, well, so now I'm working 100 hours a week. Well, shit, what do I do now, right? You run out of week, right? And so a lot of people miss this idea of leverage. And so here you are, you're out on your own. You're trying to say it's not Holley, it's more. You start to bring people in. And so as you're going through all this, Holley, how are you thinking about sort of a magical combination of creating intellectual capital and scaling to create leverage?
So I would say that has been the single hardest thing that I've experienced, I think, for Gray Matter, because I felt like I made a lot of bad choices or poor, uninformed decisions that I think in many ways you guys would frown upon, but I've learned. But I think that was the hardest thing, to essentially say that if you want to work with us, this is what we offer. Take it or leave it. And I know that you're not going to get this from anybody else, because we're very, very specialized. And some people will be like, no, thank you, or we don't want that. But they would almost always come back at some point, because they knew that they couldn't actually find, there wasn't a proxy. And I don't say that to make myself feel, like I'm not trying to brag. I think it was just a reality that I held very strongly to. And so I think it took me a while to figure out, how can I productize this or create a framework that allows Gray Matter to replicate this at scale, to your point, and also be profitable. And I think that was the biggest challenge that I had, which was I wanted to do what I call like the strategy, kind of the category design strategy, but we weren't charging enough, frankly, for that. We were making money on the execution, which is like, here's your blueprint. We've told you your category, your supers, your POV narrative. Here's how you go intersect with them. But I felt like that was at odds with how the life sciences industry's business works, meaning they're like, that's not the blueprint we want. We have a blueprint, which is sales reps, and we're going to go on and just hire sales reps. And so in some ways, I felt like there was definitely a period of time where I felt like I was speaking Mandarin and they were speaking Portuguese, and I was making a cake and they were making, like, I don't know, a salad. And I felt like we're not on the same page. And I think that was the hardest thing for me, was to make that shift. And it was a slow moving shift versus like flipping a switch. But I felt like that was the aha for me, that you have to basically create a blueprint that can be replicated and shifts from, as you guys have said, shifts from being paid hourly to being paid for a deliverable. And that was something that, not only that, but when your reputational capital is around the outcomes that you unlock for people, then the valuation and the pricing becomes a different story. And I think, again, because I was new to this, I hadn't done this before. I didn't have a real, person. I didn't have a Yoda saying, do these things. I did make a lot of mistakes, but I really feel very bullish that where we are now, we are known for our outcomes. We're getting paid for deliverables at, still a screaming deal. I feel like still a screaming deal, but I think it's given us a different lens to say, one, no sell. Like, honestly, like, I don't care if you don't like what we have to say or don't want to do it. Like, you need us way more than we need you. And I think also trying to find ways to scale this even within gray matter so that other people can be category design architects and other people can really help drive behavior change in a highly regulated, very specialized market. It's hard to find people, I think, to do this. You can't just go out and, find people on whatever, Indeed.com.
So one thing I'm reading between the lines of what you're saying is that, and I want to double click on the first set of intellectual capital that it sounds like you created, processes and productizing your offer, was as much internal, because it sounded like you led with hiring your team before all of it had been set up and the like, right? There's three moving parts. There's the team, there's the intellectual capital so that they can follow it, and then there's you're elevating your pricing to match the offer, the value that you're delivering, right? And it sounds like you went team, then intellectual capital, process, and then pricing.
Yes.
And then what was the first, what's so fascinating is that a lot of intellectual capital starts internal. It's not necessarily stuff that clients buy. It's like, I'm working too hard. We're working too hard. Let's make this easier on all of us, right? So you just codify it internally so that you don't have to do that again. Like, is that right? Like, can you tell us what the specific bit of IC or process or productization that you did, and what did it do for because you brought on your team, and I'm guessing it made them more productive and gave you more leverage to go find a third client and a fourth client.
Yeah. I think the best thing we did initially was it was basically like our category design late, it was kind of our good. I didn't know what it was, but we basically put together like an offering, a module, like here are the workshops we're going to go through, here are the steps we're going to go through, and here's who needs to be, from the client side, here's who needs to be involved at these steps and decisions and these types of things. So I think nailing down, like, here's our offering, here are the steps we go through, here are the decision points being made. We could replicate that again and again with clients. It wasn't like each time we had to figure out what are we going to do this night. It was like, here's how we go through this kind of strategy process. I think the second thing we did was we started to recognize where our clients most deficient internally. Like, what are the resources in the functional areas that they probably don't have time, people, or expertise to do? Most life sciences companies on the marketing side, they're sales reps or engineers that got into marketing, but it's really more like product management. It's not really, educating and activating a market at large. And so I think we realized that a lot of these companies are deficient in kind of these areas. It was really kind of PR, content, and creative. And so we started to narrow those things down. So it wasn't like if someone said, do you do X? We're like, we'll do X. Like, we couldn't be running around with our heads cut off. We had to basically say, these are the areas we know people are going to need the most help in. And so we're going to go narrow in this. And I think the challenge with that is that we very quickly realized we were like the Dr. Pepper of sodas back in the day. We were misunderstood. People didn't know what category to put us in. Are you a PR agency? Are you a marketing agency? Are you a consulting firm? And I think that was challenging. And so we were trying to kind of, again, like, create this reproducible model. But I also felt like our potential clients didn't always know how to think about that, because they were like, well, we already have a PR agency, or we just need to do a press release, like, just do a press release. And we're like, that's not what you need to do. And so I think trying to create things that are reproducible and narrow our focus was probably the most helpful. But then I think, Eddie, it was really transferring new engagement. So it's like, it doesn't have to start with me. It can start with someone else on the team, so that they could recognize that it's still gray matter. It's the same when you go to McDonald's, you're getting the same French fries, right? It was that idea of replicating that and creating confidence. And it did take a while to kind of shift legacy clients, legacy people. But I realized, as you were saying, Christopher, I could not have enough hours in the day. I ran out of time.
Right. So now I have a question for you about this as it relates to AI. Last week, I had a conversation with the CEO of a very high-end strategy consulting firm. And he was telling me that one of his partners is leaving, and they have a small, comparatively, partner group. And then he said to me, and we're not replacing him. I said, why is that? Because I knew business was good. And he said, well, we've been building our own custom LLM. We've put all of our methodologies, all of our work product, all of our decks, all of our spreadsheets, you name it, you think about back in the old days, we would create an intranet. That's what we called it. And we put all the documents and all the deliverables and all that and tried to create a high level of reusability in the consulting business to improve leverage, right? Like we talked about. And what the CEO was saying to me was the way they're doing that today is with AI. And he had some guesstimates, but essentially they were hoping they were going to be able to grow the firm a third to a half without hiring anybody. Now, he doesn't know if that's possible yet, but he knows for sure he's not recruiting to fill this partner spot because they're like this close to unleashing their LLM for internal use purposes. So I'm just curious, as you think about all these things in your history and all that, you've done so much to scale, build frameworks, build lots of IC, et cetera, et cetera. Where does AI now fit in your thinking?
AI fits in our thinking and our use every single day, and it's only accelerated. And I think, one of the limiting factors that I still felt at Gray Matter was a lot was in my head, or it just would take time. And I was like, I don't have the time to share what's in my head, and I don't have enough time to do, 3 jobs or 2 jobs. And so making that commitment, as you were saying, to one, capturing the knowledge, capturing the frameworks, building out the, large language model, teaching it. What does Holley sound like? I mean, if y'all know me, like I have a very specific sound. I have a very specific, kind of personality. And at first, I feel like when people...
And you have a great voice, and it's clear there's some southerny things feathered in there, and it's not exactly clear where in America you're from, but yeah, it's definitely an asset.
Until I have some bourbon, then you're like, or you hear me talk to my family and you're like, oh, okay.
Got a lot more southerny there, didn't she?
Way more southern, or if I'm very tired, all those things. But yes, I think that, when I created Gray Matter or formed Gray Matter and had to do a simple task of like, what's your brand personality, right? It was savvy, exuberant, and bold. And so I feel like anytime you interact with Gray Matter or me, I feel like people should be like, that sounded like Holley. That was Holley. And I feel like to translate that or to scale that is hard. Historically, it was like, oh, I got to go write a blog, or I got to go find 3 hours to do this thing, or whatever it was. And I just thought, like, there's got to be a better way, there's got to be a better way. And there is, obviously there is. And so I think we really spent the last year, especially trying to find a way to build our own model that we felt like would help us create the velocity that I think had been missing. And I feel like we've had a lot, we've always been blessed with like really smart, talented people, original thinking, people that have very high standards, very high performers. But I still feel like I had to do a lot of editing, because it was like, it's still just not quite what I would say or not quite right. And I feel like that once we made that decision to kind of work smarter with AI, that has been, I think, such a marked distinction in time of a force multiplier in terms of us being able to produce things. Because I think at the end of the day, it's not like we don't know what to do. It's just that we couldn't do it as fast and at scale and as kind of accurate as we wanted. And it's remarkable. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. It's remarkable to me when you do it well, when you build your prompts well and you've built your model well, what you're getting out is pretty damn good. And the amount of time that you have to actually, fix it or adjust it is pretty minimal. And I think we're still just scratching the surface. Like I'm already like in my head thinking of so many more ways that we could tap into this to create the velocity that we want.
Well, it's so fascinating because I think this AI analog is essentially the journey every consulting firm founder is on, of like, how do I replicate myself so that I can scale, from hiring to productizing your process to, and you know what's kind of fascinating to me, like between what you're doing now with AI, but also like standardizing the first project is not what I was expecting you to say. Because usually the first project is like, I mean, let me show you all of the holliness comes in the first one. Now you're hooked. Here's my number two, and I'm going to exit stage left or whatever. But like, I'm kind of, because at this point you have how many people at Gray Matter?
9.
So that's a not an easy journey to go from
No.
Holley to 2 people to 9. There must have been, I'm sure there's a bunch of inflection points, but there must have been something that you were like, and you had said you weren't setting out to create Gray Matter from the very beginning. So at what point did you say, this is a thing I can build Gray Matter? And then what was it something that you did, some intellectual capital, some process change, or something that you said, oh, I can scale if I find the right people and I train them up, they can become multiple Hollies? Because I think now you went from one Holley as an employee and an executive leading different things, to as a solo person there were 2 Hollies running around, half went here, half went there, and now you probably have the equivalent of a dozen Hollies running around, or something along those lines. That, what was the thing that kind of made you say Gray Matter can work, or Gray Matter is what I want to do? And was there a magic aha?
I think that when we would do category design, it wasn't called that, but that's what it was. When we were doing category design with clients, that's like the runner's high for me. I was like, God, like we just, unlocked this amazing gift. And like, it was so exciting to think, especially because our clients are, innovative life sciences companies. So people were really trying to tackle significant, serious, kind of health conditions or, problems. And so like, it just was such a high. Like, I just was like, this is where I want to be. And people said like, well, why are you just doing this in the healthcare? Like, why won't you work for a consumer brand product? And I just realized like, this is where we can add the most value and I find most rewarding. So it was definitely a commitment of like, this is where I want to be. And then I think the question was, where do we add the most value? Yes, we can do a brochure for you. We can do a website for you, but like, where do we actually add the most value? And so I think that was kind of the second, kind of ladder rung for me. Then it was, okay, like, how do we scale this? I think it was definitely, we had to have, a blueprint, frameworks, people, but finding the right people was the hardest thing for me. I don't know why. I think it is just like a very unique, a unique DNA required. And that was hard because you couldn't test it. It's not like you can go test drive a car. It was like, okay, I'm making this commitment and it's going to take a while maybe before I see if this person's going to pan out or not. But then I think that I realized that you really did have to find people that were intellectual capitalists, point blank. They had a certain lens. They got category design. They understood how to apply it and they could use that lens. And I always say, like, we fight gravity, which is like, you fight going back to what what feels comfortable, and really finding people who were, like your merry band of pirates that believe what you believe, use the same lens, and understood the job to be done, which is actually getting people to think differently, right? And then act differently. And so I think finding those right people, and then I think being very rigid on who we work with and what we're offering, those kind of puzzle pieces had to come together for us to really scale. A decision I did make, which probably I made too late, was one, basically hiring an agency operations manager. I didn't do that forever. So we were all kind of like lumping along, trying to do everything. So that was a huge position. The other one was for years, probably 10 years. Everyone was a 1099, everyone was an FTE. And I realized I need the most exceptional people. And like myself, I felt like I was undervalued, or I had, some amazing expertise that, should be valued. And I realized I need the Steph Currys. I'm looking for the Steph Currys of the world. I'm not looking for someone to put on a jersey and sit on the bench. And I realized that that was the wisest investment I could make, was in the right people. And I just believed that would yield a result that would pay dividends for everybody. And it wasn't just for Holley. It was, I wanted people to feel that they were creating their own future by creating their own reputational capital, intellectual capital here, that they could find themselves in the same position I did, which was I can do anything I want to do with my life.
That sounds a lot like agency and control to me. So, you know what, Holley? Like, it's so fascinating because what you were describing is part of the reason why I left my old firm was like, I didn't feel like I was good at that. And I also said, I don't know that I want to be good at that. Like, I like all the runner's high stuff. What is kind of interesting to me about you is that it's not what, and I just, you've got drop nuggets of it, is that clearly you've driven massive outcomes as a category designer, intuitive surgical, with the company in metabolic surgery and the like. You also clearly like building teams and building people up. And the nuance to me is, I guess I would have known this, but I don't think I'd heard you articulate it until now. It's one thing to be Wonder Woman, and it's another thing to figure out how to create more Wonder Women as well too. And like, that's the part that I think is so interesting. Of like, again, a lot of my guess is if we kind of looked at gray matter deeply, there'd be as much intellectual capital that goes outside the clients, but probably maybe even more that's internal to how do we create other Hollies who are going to have agency, that believe they can do anything that they want with their life. I mean, is that?
I hope so. I feel, again, everyone has a choice of how they spend their time and where they work, right? And I feel like I want to create something special that attracts special people and makes them want to stay as long as it serves them. And I think to do that, maybe it's knowing what, you know, what a more dysfunctional kind of environment is like. You kind of have to, have to have context. And I felt like there were a lot of people I worked with or worked for, or companies I worked for, that I thought, I never want to be like that. I don't want to be like that. And I also feel like I was raised by, amazing people and relatives that just were such good people. Like, they were kind, they were inclusive, they lifted up others. And it just feels good to be like that. It feels good when you expend your energy in that way. And it always seemed to come back to me. I've met some amazing people. People have been willing to help me. I feel like I've tried to help other people, like, oh, you need a new job? Like, I'll see if I can connect you. Like, I just felt like it was something that people did for me and I want to do in return. But I do feel that it's not really altruistic. It's just, I think I've always been more of a team sport player. Like, I'm very athletic, but I was a very good runner, but I don't like to run because it was an individual sport. I wanted to be on the relay team. I wanted to be on the field hockey team, the soccer team, because I love being part of a team and I do like to lead.
Amazing. Well, I mean, it's you go from somebody who, I'll tell you, Holley, having worked with some of these life science and medical aesthetic companies, there are not many people like you in them. There's a lot of career kind of like, let me wait it out, get promotion, do the political game thing. So that you were able to drive those outcomes in those places were amazing. But what you're describing is a career long mission of, you knew the value of your value. You felt like it was undervalued. So you had to go create your own value in a situation where you could do that. And now you're also committed to making sure that everybody else that you bring along also is able to create, because like, their own value. Because like, what you've also touched upon, the magic words that you said, I want them to have the intellectual horsepower to be here for as long as it serves them. Consulting is a way station. I've always said, like, some people stay in it forever, like I have, and this and that, but it's not meant to be a forever gig for everybody. And yet there are people that I know who run firms like you do, who are kind of have the mindset of like, no, I want to keep you for as long as I can so that you can be useful to me and don't leave and do it. But as somebody who's left to do their own thing, I mean, you know what the value of it is. And it sounds like you're raising people with the expectation that at some point they're going to go do magical things when it's the right time for them. And that's not everybody in your shoes.
No, and our tagline is do what matters, which I think kind of has, multiple dimensions, but it's like, do what matters for your clients, work with clients that hopefully are doing things that matter to evolve healthcare, but also do what matters to people. I feel like I've learned that people are motivated different ways. What matters to one person may be different than somebody else, and kind of understanding that. But I do feel that having a sense of purpose It's very important to me. I definitely know people who just go and collect a paycheck. They're fine. They don't want to color outside the lines. I just feel like I've always really wanted to. I think June Carter said like something like, I'm just trying to make a difference, you know? And I feel like at the end of the day, like we work so hard. What do you show for it? I mean, I'm probably, well, I know I probably spend more time than I should for others and not as much for myself. But I do feel like at the end of the day, like I think the idea of like you want to put a dent on the universe. You want to have done something that you're proud of and people are proud of, and because otherwise you're just spending a lot of time, you know.
I'm reminded of a joke meme in Silicon Valley where people get stock options, and as you know, they vest over time. You earn them over time. And this idea of, you walk by somebody's office or cube and they're kind of resting, maybe their feet are up on the desk, or, they're kind of sitting like this. And you go over and you say, "Hey, Jimmy, what are you doing? Jimmy, what are you doing? Jimmy, what are you doing?" "Shh, I'm vesting."
I love it. Well, it's funny because
Right? They call it resting and vesting.
yeah, rest. I love it. Well, it's interesting because I was an early employee with a company called Computer Motion, which was acquired by Intuitive Surgical. I could have stayed at Intuitive Surgical, it'd be like my 30th year. I mean, I don't know if you guys know the company's valuation, but like I would literally be like a billionaire. I mean, like I would have so much money, it'd be crazy. But I also feel like what I would have had to forego, and maybe it's not financial riches, but it's riches in other ways. And I think in many ways, I feel like there was two paths I could have taken. I could have just stayed the course, been the good girl, and just, carried. And I'm sure I would be, high level executive. The current CEO was my peer. We were like product managers at the time. He's now the CEO. He's been there for forever. And some people say like, well, do you regret the choice you made? And I don't, I don't. My life has unfolded in ways I probably could never have expected, but I wouldn't trade it. And I feel like I'll make that money. I'll vest in different ways. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's a mind fuck for a lot of people because we have such a money-oriented culture. And money's great. God bless capitalism. I mean, you're talking to a paperboy with a no GED who retired the first time at 38 years old. So God bless America and capitalism. Yes, woohoo. And having nice things is wonderful. And me and a bunch of buddies went out to the greatest Italian restaurant last night and drank 14,000 bottles of Brunello. And so all that is great. It depends on what you're measuring, right? About 10, 15 years ago, I was offered a full ride, full partnership at a VC firm with a guarantee over 10 years of a stupid amount of money. I didn't consider it. I couldn't consider it because I was at a place in my life where other things mattered more than the money. That's an 80, 100-hour-a-week job for a decade. And I know what that job's like. I've done those kinds of jobs. And earlier in my career, it would have been my fantasy job. But at that stage of my life, the calculus had shifted, right? And so it depends on what we're measuring. If we're measuring a blend of financial agency and time agency, that's very different than when we're focused on just financial outcomes, right? Or to your point on building teams, we get to a point where for many of us, not for all of us, but for many of us, you get to a place where you get to whatever level of success you wanted to get to. For me in my life, it was always, is Christopher going to make it? Right? My mother, terrified. Well, once I got to a place where I made it, emphasis shifts. At least it did for me, to others. Because it's like, okay, well, I don't have to worry about myself that much anymore. I got my shit handled. My career's on a good path. I'm financially in a great place. My marriage is in a good place. My life's in a good place. I'm on very solid ground here. I've established credibility. I've established intellectual capital. I've produced outcomes. And it shifts to, it's the George Lucas school of legendary careers. You start off as Princess Leia. You blow up a bunch of Death Stars and beat the bad guys. And then you graduate, if you're lucky, to Obi-Wan. And then it shifts from blowing up Death Stars to making more Leias. And if you're really great at Obi-Wan, you get anointed Yoda. And then your job is to create more Obi-Wans and Leias and Lukes. And that, I didn't know that when I was Luke. And the gift of being a successful Leia or Luke, at least through my lens, is you earn the right to be Obi-Wan. And I have a 94-year-old father-in-law who is abso-fucking-lutely Yoda in his world. And I'm working real hard right now because I want to earn my Yoda, because if Yoda is anywhere near as good as earning the Obi-Wan, that's right. And so it just shifts to a different thing.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. Felt that in my heart for sure. Yeah.
Why?
As you said, people measure success in different ways. And I respect how one person may accept success or define success. But I feel like, I mean, settling is maybe not the right word, but to your point, like, just feel like there's the return for myself is just always higher the more you kind of follow that, pursue that higher order, higher pathway.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful feeling. Katrina's success is more important to me than my own. I've had my day. It's been great. And I hope have more days. But her tax problems are a lot more important to me than my tax problems, if you know what I mean.
Well, I appreciate Katrina and her story she shared. But one of the things about having agency that I wanted to share with you, Katrina, is when I was with Gray Matter, I had more flexibility, wasn't married, didn't have children. And I just went to Spain. I went to Madrid, and I just worked in Madrid. And I still had my company, but I had the agency to do that. And no one was like, "You're crazy."
Did you pick up a Spanish husband? Is that what happened?
No, I honestly wish that I had stayed longer. But honestly, like, it was such an amazing experience. But I thought, to your point, Christopher, this is what it means to me, is to be able to do these things that others can't do. Gray Matter's always been remote, even before, COVID. And so the idea is like, you can work, you can do things. There's so many false constraints that are placed on you. And it's like, why can't I work
Do you
in
know how many
Spain?
people told me that I was so making the wrong decision, leaving my startup job in Denver to go travel the world? And they were like,
They're
good
just
luck
jealous.
with that.
Yeah.
Good luck
They're
with
just
that.
jealous. Yeah.
And now 10 years later, they're like, I guess you made that work, huh?
I know. And I think that's kind of the
Maybe
thing,
Katrina's not so stupid after.
but I think that's the thing, is sometimes you're told, like, to be successful, you do it this way. And I think when you challenge that, people get uncomfortable. And then when you show them that, no, like, I can create the world that I want, they are definitely envious. They're jealous.
Some people can be envious in a slightly angry way. And here's what I mean by it. When they say that stuff to us, what they're really saying is they've cut themselves off of making those kinds of courageous choices for themselves. And our success invalidates them because they didn't make that decision. They want to be right that what you should get is a good government job and a nice pension and rest and vest. And then when somebody says, well, that might be right for you, but it's not fucking right for me, and you go and, if you will, disprove their theory, make them wrong. You're not intending to, you're doing your life, but they're envious, they resent it because you make them wrong about the choice that they made, because they made the choice in part by convincing themselves that it's not possible to go out and blow up Death Stars. It's not possible to go and build Gray Matter marketing from nothing into something and to create massive millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of value and build people's careers and help incredibly important companies in our world contribute and make people healthier and all the things that you're part of doing, right? It's a massive agenda you're executing against. And people who are small get upset by people who play big.
There's a quote, as it's my bulletin board. I've had this for, I don't know, 20 some years. It's from Gilda Radner, and it says, life is about not knowing, having to change, taking the moment, and making the best of it without knowing what's going to happen next. Delicious ambiguity. And there's something that's always struck me about that, which is, again, to your point, having that safety net, having the conforming to the norm, just staying in your lane, like, it suits a lot of people. But when you embrace that delicious ambiguity and you believe that, like, I can make this happen, it transforms your life. And it's just, again, like, I would never trade it. Having permission to lean into the delicious ambiguity is something that I feel very fortunate that I felt like I had.
I love Gilda Radner.
I know.
I remember, I forget who said it. It was one of those early SNL folks where they said they'd be writing skits, working on stuff, and they'd have some scenario planned out that they really liked, but they weren't quite sure where to take it next. And she was so great. They'd sort of they'd create the scenario, they'd write it out, and then they'd just insert Gilda does something great here. And then they'd continue with the scenario and they'd
No
present it
pressure,
to
no
her.
pressure.
And
Yeah.
they'd say, well, here's sort of the beginning. We don't really know what the middle is. We sort of had an idea as an end, but go. And she would just, Rosanna Dana her way through the thing, and we'd all pee ourselves laughing.
She was a legend for sure.
Well, Holley, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. What's the best way for people to connect with you? Where can they find you if they want to learn more about you and Gray Matter?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share this time with you guys. My website is greymattermarketing.com, GREY, in case you mistyped that. And then, of course, I was always interested to meet people and connect people on LinkedIn. My name is Holley, Holley. My mother's maiden name. That's why it's spelled weird. I feel like I have to validate that so people don't think it's some strange, obtuse spelling for no reason.
You changed it when you moved to California.
Exactly. It's a silent Q. Don't pronounce a silent Q. I'm just kidding.
We'll add links to everything in the notes.
But no, I live in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. I'm a Southerner, born and bred, so you'll hear y'all a lot if you talk to me. But no, it's just so amazing to connect with people that challenge the status quo, want to create the agency to create the life they want, and would love to support anyone I can in any way or connect with people and just hear their story.
We fucking adore you, Holley, and we're inspired by you every day.
Thank you. Likewise. It's such an honor to be amongst you pirates. So if you guys need
pirates attract more pirates.
That's right. I think I've told you all this, but I have a poster that says, it's above my desk, says, work like a captain, play like a pirate. Yeah. It's been there for 20 years, but yeah, I like that sentiment.
You were a pirate before you were a pirate.
I didn't even know. I don't know if I could pull off an eye patch, but yeah. I'm like,
You're an MVP, a natural born pirate.